silent before. Because I might be a little more, well, a little bit more wired than usual. So if I start kind of going off and going crazy, just, give me a visual cue. Well, I'm not very good at visual cue. Just let me know if I'm going really, really fast. I'm a little excited. I will share a little bit of why I'm super excited. I've been talking with both Dr. Duckworth and Dr. Diamond, and both the conversations have gone into two different directions, but directions that are just really, really amazing and cool, and there's other things that's happening right now. So, in lieu of that, and that just happened in the last 30 minutes to an hour, so that's why I'm still kind of like, going crazy. But before we get started, I know we talked a little bit about grit yesterday, and who remembers the 4 elements of grit? There's passion or interest. What else? There's practice. There's purpose. And there's hope. So we're going to kind of continue in this trajectory of talking about grit, social emotional, because grit is a social emotional skill. If you guys look at the Castle Guide, it's a combination of the whole discipline, focus, self-control and all of those. So we're going to continue in that trajectory. But before we start, I want to start it off. Thank you. You can just put it down right there. I want to start it off with this. Again, I like to give kind of like frames into our conversation. The first frame that I really want to talk about is we are not fixing people. Okay? I hope over and over again I keep talking about this. Kids' lives are not projects. Alright? You and me are not here to fix anybody. To say that people need fixing is to say that people are broken. Okay? And the problem with the broken thing is it's kind of like plate or a cup. How many of you have broken a plate, a china plate or a china cup? You can glue that back together, and what happens? It can either break again, or there will always be a crack. Right? There's no way that crack will disappear. So the idea of fixing people, one, believes that people are actually broken, which means that identity of being broken will always stay with them. Right? Which, again, we don't believe that. Alright? Because at the end of the day, we are not here to fix people. The second part that I really, really want to emphasize, because sometimes we learn a whole lot of things, right, is that there is no magic bullet or secret key. This is what drives me insane about our modern culture. We call it life hacks. They will make some sort of discovery, and then all of a sudden everybody's doing it because they think it is the one key to everything else. That's nuts. And we have this obsession as a culture, as a society. This is currently happening with the research of grit. Right? All of a sudden, all the educators in the United States want to put grit and slowly mindfulness. Nothing against these things. In fact, we're teaching it. Right? All of a sudden, all the schools want to do mindfulness. And all of a sudden, they're forgetting that there's a billion other elements. What I want us all to understand that what we do here, what we're learning, every part that we do is just, it's not a secret key. It is just a small piece to the puzzle. And the reality of it is, that small piece to the puzzle is exactly that. We don't have all the answers, and we will never have all the pieces. So it's important that we understand our piece of the puzzle, and we use that. So I want to be very clear. So as we're learning grit, because this is what happens. If we believe that anything we're learning, that there's a magic bullet, and this usually happens when we go to school. When we go to school, we go to college, we learn our specialty. Right? And then when we go to college, a lot of pontificating happens. A lot of, convincing happens. And then sometimes we end up convinced that that is the way. That is the secret key. Everybody should know this. This is the magic bullet. What happens is two things. One, like I said, we begin to believe in that and focus in that and not focus on other things. The second part that happens is we get frustrated when we see it doesn't work. Because sometimes it won't work because, like I said, it's just one piece of the puzzle. And what happens when the puzzle when the puzzle you're working with, that is not the piece they're missing. Right? So we have to understand those things. And before we move on, I really want to identify why helping and serving are two different things. And why here in our context it is really important that we recognize where we're at. Alright? Helping and serving are two different things. So let's dissect this a little bit. What does helping mean? What does actually helping mean? So there's an idea of assisting. But what else? To help someone, again, that's the idea of assisting. What else? When you're helping someone, what are the assumptions? And let's not go too philosophical here. I just want the general help. Reason.
They need you, or like there's something lacking that they can't do for themselves.
There is a lack. Therefore, because of the lack, there is a perceived power that they need. That the assumption is, who has this power? The helper. The helper. For lack of a better term, the helpee. What else? What happens in helping? When do we help? When do we help? When there's a problem, a need, or a crisis.
Are we talking about the helpee or the helper?
Help in both. In both situations.
There's like an intention.
Huh?
There's like an intention. Like the helper is only helping because they're giving attention to an area that they see needs. So like, yeah, perception.
As a perception of a specific area, right? That's what you're saying, Kenny?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not helping anybody.
What else? Huh? There's almost a contract involved. There's an asking and an understanding.
It's like, I'm going to make it better.
And it goes back to that power. Right? And part of the contract is also the helper is going to make that better. There's also, I haven't heard it mentioned, but it's been alluded to, there's also a certain level of, not necessarily perfection, but strength, or model, or rightness, or righteousness is the right word. We even hear it sometimes. You can't help someone unless you've been there yourself. Right? You can't help someone unless you've been through it. Or there's a certain level of expertise. I may have spelled righteousness wrong. I think I did.
R-I-G-H-T-E-O.
No, that's right. H is in the wrong space.
H is in the wrong
Oh,
place.
okay.
Sorry. Okay, there's a certain expertise. Right? There's a certain expertise. You're helping someone because you are better at that than they are. Can the blind help the blind? In our assumption when it comes to walking, right? They shouldn't be, because how can a blind help the blind? That's why we even have the expression like blind leading the blind, you know, all of those things. See, the problem with helping is, again, this is all really goes back to the mindset of fixing. There's a certain mindset of fixing attached to helping. Now, I'm not against helping, okay? But in the context of our work, there's a reason why I'm making a clear delineation to what we're doing. And in the context of fixing, our brains actually equate fixing to objects. And whenever our brains equip something, mentally interpret something as an object, there is a level of superiority. An objectification. That's why we call it objectification. That's why in the example I gave, what have we effectively done with men and women? Men have been taught to objectify Women, which means who's superior? Men, in their minds, giving them the right to do whatever it is they need in the basis of women need help. It's the same thing that has happened again. I will refer back to this because it's my background in the church. Love the sinner, hate the sin. It's stupid. Because again, we objectify a person as being a sinner, as something beneath the person loving that person. When in reality, there's no biblical basis to that statement. There's just love people. But again, we have this idea of superiority. That's why rating of sins happen in the church a lot. Right? So, in the idea of helping, there is this idea still related to fixing. Serving, on the other hand, is a very different concept. Someone's car is beeping. Whose car could that be? What is serving? And who can serve? Look at that. Lucky try. Maybe not lucky. Yeah, let's, why don't we have a guy check? Or, yeah, go so that there's, because there's still a social concept that guys are scarier. And we have to take advantage of that social concept.
But I'm pretty sure that whoever is out there, they're gonna see Desmond and what's it? They're gonna see Ethan and be like, nope. Like I'm more afraid of Ethan.
You're more afraid of Isa. No,
Isa's approachable when you don't know her.
Isa's approachable when you don't.
Well,
It's a terrible statement. Do you realize how terrible that statement is?
So there's two spectrums. When you don't know her, she's super approachable. When you do absolutely know her, she's super approachable still. But like in the middle ground, Juan, not approachable.
Wow!
Go ahead, clean it up,
I
Raymond.
don't know how I feel about that statement, Reba, but I'll take that statement.
I think she would.
I don't doubt that she will agree with that statement.
Oh my god.
I have full faith in what I said. I'm not incorrect.
So, let's focus back in. So let's start with the serving part. Who can serve?
Anyone.
In serving, anyone can serve. A little kid can serve as equally as an adult. Right? Anyone can serve. And that's the beauty of service. What else? What else? So, if anyone can serve, what is removed in serving? I think I heard somebody say, power. There is no power struggle. The person who is injured can serve the same person who is injured. There is no power involved in this. I know it might be just a semantic concept, a word concept, but words matter. And how we associate with words matter. And how our brain associates certain things with words matter. And this matters. The idea that helping socially, there is a power involved versus serving matters. When you serve, you can be, in the societal term of brokenness, you can be as broken as the person you're serving. And it doesn't matter. Because serving in its purest concept is what? Is there a need to be a problem to serve?
No.
No, what is simply service? Is there even a duty involved in it? What is simply service? Just being nice? It's just being available? It's just a personal desire? It's just a personal discipline? Service in its purest form is just simply doing. For whatever motivation is behind it. Often associated, not saying always, associated with some sort of love. You serve because you love. Not because you're better, not because you have something more to offer, not because you have a magic key, not because the other person is weak and they need help. Well, biggest example I'll give is, yesterday, I left my judo bag in the car. And I sent Kenji to grab his judo bag. Now, my judo bag is probably as heavy as Kenji. Now, Kenji grabs his bag, and all of a sudden, I see him struggling into my office because he is dragging my bag with him. He's not helping me. In fact, he probably ruined my bag by dragging it. I mean, it's the truth. He's not stronger than me. I didn't ask him to do it. There was no crisis. But why did Kenji do that? There is just a desire. He wanted whatever ulterior motives he has, you know, because I never know sometimes with how conniving he can get, right? He didn't ask me for anything, at least not yet, right? But with joking aside, he did that not because there was a problem, not because there was a lack. He wasn't necessarily assisting me in anything. There was no contract. There was no involved, I'm going to help you, here's something in return. He's not the strength model. In fact, it was a struggle for him. It was a struggle for him to do that, and there was no fixing involved. He did that out of the simple desire to do it. See, when we help, it takes away from us. We get tired. Because we're helping, we're taking away from us. But when we serve, and people, and the funny thing is, this is part of the reason I'm so excited, there's actually research and science behind this. When we serve, when we simply do it, when anyone does it, there's actually a form of personal reconciliation that happens. Personal healing, whatever you want to put it, however you want to term it. If you guys remember, last Friday, we trained about vicarious trauma. And what was their observation that they know about people who are in social service or who are doing this work? Do you guys remember what they say? What type of people are often in this work?
People that have gone through trauma.
People who have gone through trauma themselves. People who have ACE scores that are really, really high as well. Does it mean that those people are already experts? And they're better? No. But in some sort of weird way, by serving, it becomes a personal reconciliation, and it becomes a way of actually healing. See, helping can actually make your worldview more cynic. Because again, there's that power involved in it. The world is not fixable. Yes, you are correct. Hence, serve it. There is ideally in serving. That's why it's serving, you're not paid, right? There is not necessarily a need for a contract, whether implied or explicit. Serving is birthed out of personal generosity. You know, statistically, who gives the most? People who have the least. It's a generosity thing. It's not a power thing. They're giving simply because they want to be generous. And in a sense, serving actually creates, hi Oscar, a sense of belonging. Service allows you to belong. Because in serving somebody else, you realize you're not alone. And in that same sense, that person you're serving, because you're not helping them, they realize they're not alone. That they're not the only person going through whatever that struggle is. And you don't create an equation of where that whole issue that we were talking about, where we equate the problem with empathy that people have, is they begin to equate experiences. In serving, there is no contract, therefore there is no equating of anything. It's just a simple act of doing. And it goes back to this idea, in serving, there is not necessarily, again, in an ideal world, an end goal. It is just the simple fact of walking alongside someone. See, in helping, there's always an end goal. You don't help forever. You help the moment. When do you stop helping? The moment it's done. The project is over. I'm done helping you. Either when the project is over, or when you perceive it to be over, or when you're emotionally exhausted. When you are out of resources. You stop helping the moment you're out of resources. In serving, there is no end goal. You just serve.
So there is or there isn't?
There is no. Oh, no end goal. There is no end goal. You just keep serving. So, as we continue learning in this work, and what we do, I really want us to understand why I emphasize for the last 5-6 years, we are not in the business of fixing. There is nothing to fix. We are not saviors. We are not here to save people. If you keep in the mentality of helping, fixing, saving, you will get exhausted. You will get irritated. And after a while, you don't want to do this work anymore. Vicarious trauma, we learned about this. May not be the most exciting presentation in the world, but it was a boatload of good information. We have to get into the mindset of serving. Our own issues are fine. We work alongside them. The same patience that we give ourselves is the same patience that we should give others. Same grace and mercy that we give ourselves is the same grace and mercy that others should be given, because again, we're not any better than them. I want to be very clear about that. You and me are not any better than any of the families we're helping. Our situations may be better, but as human beings, you might be surprised how much better some of the families and kids we're helping are than us. You might be surprised how much more selfless they are than you and me. You might be surprised just how much more willing they are to sacrifice than you and me. Because at the end of the day, as human beings, I don't care how many college degrees we have, I don't care how much expertise we have, we are no better than them. Because the world does not need fixing. Well, people does not need fixing. Things do. Systems do. Society as a system does. But people, they don't. So I really want us to understand this mindset and really differentiate between helping and serving. Because it's a very thin line. And sometimes in the process of serving, we begin to get into the mentality of helping. And we get tired. I've been there. You and I will probably constantly shift back and forth. That's why it is a constant reminder that we need to remind ourselves. We are not fixing people. We are not even helping them. We are serving them. And in that process, it just might make us better as well. And in that process, we just might grow with them as well. So, comments, questions, and then we'll move on to what we're actually going to learn. Andy.
I think a good example of the difference between helping and serving is like when the floods hit Texas, FEMA came in and Red Cross came in and they set their stuff up, and then when the need was done, they left. But the people that were there in their own personal boats and their own waders, helping people because they needed help. They were the ones that were serving. There was no implied contract, there was no call for them to do anything. They were there on a humanity basis, as opposed to being contractually obligated or sent.
Yes.
to the serving.
Thank you for that word picture in that example. Rena.
There's like this typical idea of like when you're serving someone that instead of there being no power, that the power is given to the person that you're serving. Is that an incorrect like way to think about it? Because that's something
I don't know if it's
that,
incorrect.
that's just something that I thought
I don't know if it's incorrect. I don't see it as bad.
like it turns the
Power to the person you're serving. Maybe that is better than what I said, no power. I frankly, that's one that I don't know, but I actually like that. That's a good way of putting it.
Can you think about it and let me know?
Can I think about it and let you know? Okay, yes, I will definitely most think about it and
Let
let
me
you
know
know.
your opinion, not
My
mine.
opinion, yes, yes. Rebecca.
Feel that with serving, there's a sense of vulnerability for the person who's doing it,
Oh, yes.
because you're kind of how Kim was saying about giving power to the other person, you're opening yourself up to be taken advantage of.
Yes. Serving requires vulnerability, absolutely. I will end this with a quote that was given to me by Dr. Adele Dyer. This, all who serve life. This is being recorded, but this is on a private. So, just to share a little bit, part of the reason a lot of these conversations is happening, Dr.
Do you want us to pause it?
Just don't talk too much about it, but it'll give a good context. Dr. Diamond is currently suffering of very, very dangerous sickness. Let's just put it that way. So there is a whole lot of thought behind what she's doing beyond just the neuroscience of things. So I will leave it as that. But here's what she said. So please don't put that anywhere publicly. All who serve life. What we serve is something worthy of our attention, of the commitment of our time and our lives. Service is not about fixing life, outwitting life, manipulating life, controlling life, or struggling to gain mastery over life. Instead, when we serve, we discover that life itself is holy. Service is closer to generosity than it is to duty. It connects us to one another and to life itself. The best definition of service I have come across is a single word: belonging. Service is the final healing of isolation and loneliness. It is the lived experience of belonging. So, again, something that I just want us all to really, really understand. Because like I said, I've repeated that we are not fixing people over and over, that people are not projects. Alright? And now I really want to drive this message in. We're not even helping people. We're serving them. We are serving people. We're alongside with them. We're not any better than them. We are just as equally as needing of growth as they are. And we're growing alongside. So, with that, let's actually go and do a little test. I hope everybody did their homework. If you didn't, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time. So what I need you guys to do, this is the 12-item grit scale. This is a test that we give our kids. What I need you guys to do is take the first 2 pages. Hey, give me half so I can expedite it. Take the first 2 pages and answer it as honestly as you possibly can. Okay, we are not going to compare scores, so please don't be like, oh, look at my score, it's higher than everybody else. I don't really care what your score is. She can just twiddle her thumbs or go online and do it. So, take the test, answer it as honestly as you possibly can. you will retake this test. Okay? You will retake this test, but I want you to take this test right now. Alright? Don't, and really quickly. Everybody look at me. Thank you. Really quickly. Do not think too much about the questions. Alright? That's the only way this will work. Just as quickly as possible, answer the first choice that comes to mind. Alright? And again, I'm not going to look at the score. You can compare it with other people if you want to, but we are not comparing scores. So just go ahead and take the test. Here.
No, they're still passing out, that's why.
Yeah, you can put your name on it so that you don't lose it. I thought I printed enough for everybody.
You did.
Okay.
They were still going.
Okay.
It out.
Everybody should be almost done with this, if not already done.
Because I do these. I have to score this all the time.
Oh yeah, you have to start it all the time.
Because I just scored.
Okay. Did everybody finish? Who has not finished? Raise your hand if you're not done. Okay, I'll give you time. I'm sorry, am I causing anxiety right now?
Yes, because I don't know if I'm being true or not.
Just do it. Everyone got it? Because now we are going to score it. And here's how the scoring system goes once you are done. Okay. Raise your hands if you still need time. Okay. So here's how to score it. For questions 1, 4, 6, 9, 10, and 12. Okay?
It's like the worst way to explain it.
1, and just pay attention really quick. Mark these numbers for question 1, 4, 6, 9, 10, and 12. Did everybody mark those numbers? Okay. The way it's scored is very much like me as 5 and not like me at all as 1. So it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Everybody got that? Okay. For the rest of them, it's the opposite. So the rest of the numbers, it's 1 is very much like me, and 5 is not like me at all. So now, add your scores and divide it by 12.
The ones with the asterisks are the ones that go.
Yeah, the ones with the asterisk, alright, are the ones that go 1 through 5. And then the ones without the asterisk goes 5 to 1. Makes better sense?
Yes.
See, that's why I have to explain it both ways, because some people just got confused with the asterisk. Whatever.
My grid changed.
One.
No, I got it. I just
Okay.
got confused with
1,
one
4,
of them.
6.
Chill.
9, 10,
I was just
12.
asking you, Jesus.
So add them up.
Add them up and divide it by 12.
Thank you, Fernando. Sorry,
Right. It's very normal, so it's okay.
See my calculator.
Did everybody get their score? No? Okay. No need to get upset at me. I'm just asking. Jeez. That wasn't even like a no. It was like a no. Kind of a no.
That's a lot of grit.
That's not grit. That's a lot of anger. Divided by 12, yes. You can use your phones. I'm not testing your mathematical ability. I am positive.
With you we are, Rima. With you we are.
And again, I don't really care what your score is.
I do, and it sucks.
And it's okay if your score, oh my God, this is not an academic test, Rima. We're trying to outscore each other.
Oh my goodness.
That is not the goal.
Rita wants to be the most gritty.
My grit is 1.
Alright,
I have a good score of 1.5.
so, did everybody get their scores?
See.
Alright, so now, I want you to look at that score, right, and just to kind of put this in perspective, right, that is what we call, or some of you who does testing with the kids, the grit score. Alright, so grit score, now, there's 3 things that I want you guys to know. Alright, the first part is grit score is scored 1 through 5, 5 being extremely gritty, and 1 being not gritty. Second one I want you to know is a perfect score of 5 doesn't actually mean, necessarily mean that you are the grittiest and you will have the most success. In fact, for the most part, people who have the higher success, their scores are between 3.5 to 4.5. Alright, so there is that. There is those scores. The third fact that I want you to know is grit score, just like any skill, can be improved. So if you have a lower grit score, there are ways to improve your grit. This is what we're trying to do with our kids. Alright, that is ideally what we're trying to do with our kids. Now, what I want you guys to do is, let's be honest, how many of you did the homework yesterday? Yeah, the homework from yesterday.
I did it
From
before.
yesterday. Yeah, from yesterday. How many of you did the actual homework?
I did it before we left.
Alright. Now, if you didn't, quiet. What I want you to do is, if you didn't, alright, I still want you just right now to think about the question 3 that I asked, which is the purpose. One thing, activity, or area of your life that you do for a purpose. Not just because you love it, but for a reason bigger than just yourself. Think about that and write that activity down. For the rest of you, you don't need to do this because you already did it. Now what I want you to do is retake the grit test, but this time specifically pertaining to that activity or area of your life that you talked about. Does that make sense? So, again, retake the grit test, this time with the specific mindset pertaining only to that activity. Only to that activity that you answer the question with. Right. So I just asked it again. It's write what your one activity or one area of your life that you do because of a purpose. Not, yeah, because purpose is outside of yourself. So purpose is not because you love it. It's because you're doing it because of somebody else or something else. A bigger reason. Not because it's your personal dream, not because it's going to benefit you, but because of somebody else or something else.
I got a question, but I want to ask it to you later.
Okay? CC? Okay. Oh, yeah.
Someone tell me my purpose.
To be Venus master.
Thank you, Jessica.
With my job, I get the project, if I'm for purpose, emergencies.
How do we know what our purpose is?
Well, yes. So
Think of your purpose.
now ask that question only pertaining to Ireland.
Hi, Tim. You missed me.
She said you missed me.
Why are you yelling?
I am. It's terrible. It's because I've been spending too much time with her. She was
Mind you, it would change, because I already have it.
Well, that's fine.
I was like, this is it. Because my purpose is this.
never mind.
You're overthinking this thing. I will tell you this right now, you are now overthinking. It's okay. You're absolutely being honest with yourself by telling me that statement. I could have sworn somebody raised their hand. Or was that just a shadow? Oh, that was just a high five.
I think Rima should be an attorney.
Huh?
I think Rima should be an attorney.
No,
Probably the most analytical person.
no, because she will work on one case for 25
I
years
am
and still not be able to go
going
to
to make
trial.
this complicated, Ms. Rima.
Because if you put it on the back burner, is that considered lost?
Just however you interpret. If you are a student, however you want to interpret it. So tell me what you think it is. Okay, I'm sorry that you feel that way. Is everybody done or are people still doing it? There's still people doing it? It's okay if you're taking your time, I'm not rushing you. Oh my God, I cannot do that for you. I am not God.
My parents didn't tell me either.
If you believe in God, only God can tell you that. If you don't believe in God, only your own personal self can tell you that. So, I'm sorry that I disgust you. I cannot undisgust myself.
feels so light and comfy.
I don't know.
The scoring system remains the same, so if you want to score your retake, go ahead and score it.
Oh my god. I mean, this is exactly
What do you think?
that's negative on here.
See, now you're trying to score higher.
Yeah.
Which is, no, that's not the point. You're not trying to
He
score
must
higher.
gonna overanalyze it no matter what.
Score
I'm
it.
like, why is it negative?
She is, but I'm saying it's over.
Just score it.
You're making the question.
Yeah, it's
Because
not,
it's scored as a
it doesn't, again, you're not trying to get a perfect score. A perfect score does not actually mean good.
All it means is you're stubborn.
It's not negative, look. That's perception.
But it could be negative in some other context.
It could
But
be
in my
negative.
context, I think it's a positive.
It could be negative. in
Now
somebody
you
else.
guys know what our kids feel towards these tests.
I'm perfectly fine with it.
I ain't
I don't
actually
like how.
Alright, so everybody focus back in, breathe, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, last one, inhale, exhale, two more, inhale, exhale, last one, inhale, exhale. Alright, so I wanted to give you guys that test for two reasons. The first one is I want you guys to see how ineffective it can get. Okay? And that no matter how much science we put into these things, these are not accurate measures of what we're trying to measure. I hope you guys realize that. Right? In this group setting, there are different interpretations. There's different ways of doing it. Mood plays into effect. What you feel at that moment. Right? And so, that part, now, obviously we use this test and we're going to continue using it. It doesn't mean we're going to scrap it. But I do want everybody to understand why, some of the things that are not necessarily good with this. Why we don't treat this as the magic bullet. Alright, why we don't base everything we do based on test scores. Alright, it's technically a test score. The second part is I want you to do your own comparison of your grit and how it can vary depending on whether you are scoring the general sense of your decisions in life versus something very specific in your life. Right, so just with a show of hands, alright, how many of you scored higher on your second test? How many of you scored the same? How many of you scored lower? Okay, so in the general feel of the room is actually very true to that. The general feel of the room is that for the most people, whenever it is related to your purpose, you are generally grittier. Alright, so as with a show of hands, right? And again, for most people, that's why I said, there is no magic bullet to a lot of these things. Even in this room, it represented what the data shows. Most of the people, their grit scores are higher when it's towards a specific activity that has a purpose. Alright, so again, I just wanted to point that out, kind of give you guys that experience, have you guys experience what our kids experience, and also at the same time show you the flaws of these tests. I mean, I hope you guys saw the flaw just by taking it, right? And by the response in the room. There are flaws to any test. There is very little ways right now to accurately measure what is happening in our brains. Alright, outside, not even neuroscience has figured this out. Right? So just, this is the way that we have things. Okay? So I hope that kind of gets there. Now, because there is no magic bullet, Okay, because sometimes what we tend to do, and this happened to me when I first started with grit, right? What I wanted to do was test everybody, and then test everybody again a month later, then test everybody again a month later, and then test them every month until we see the end of the year. And I need to see a straight line of improvement of grit, otherwise it doesn't work, right? But again, that's subscribing to the idea of magic bullets. Alright, because there is no magic bullet, alright, there is no one thing that will be most effective. For all. Okay, so I want you guys to realize that. The approach that may be most effective for a lot of people is still not necessarily the most effective for everybody. Mindfulness, for example, is a great example of this. Mindfulness in general works for a lot of people. However, there are people that have been proven that mindfulness actually triggers them. It is actually not something they should exercise. Alright, the science in mindfulness is quite murky because of that. Alright, but again, there is no magic bullet. And so because of that, we have to understand that there is a balance of things. That's why we subscribe to this whole idea of these three-circle Venn diagram, where there's the balance of love, character building, and then there's time. Bye. And we exist in that realm. Alright, so just something extremely important to understand. Alright, these are all just pieces to a puzzle. And for us, what is important is because there are many things, or really many methods, or techniques, what is important is not learning them all. That's actually counterproductive. And it's not even practicing them all. That is also counterproductive. Okay? What is important is having a simple understanding of them. Okay? But it is important to have an understanding, even simple, of most, but a mastery of a few. So when we're talking about the higher ground methodology, yes, we are studying almost all of them. We're studying growth mindset, trauma, we're studying mindfulness, we're studying X, Y, Z. Right? It's just like martial arts. Yes, you have to have an understanding of all the techniques. Alright? You have to understand, because when it comes, and I'm using the martial arts, that way when it's done to you, you know what it feels like and you know how to defend from it. So in judo, there's 67 throws. Traditional judo, right, Rio? 67?
I don't know, I only know 5.
Yeah, but, no, that is the perfect answer. Okay? But, while Rio will have an understanding of what those 67 looks like, and he's been exposed to all of them, like he said, he only has a mastery of 5. That is true in every martial artist. It's the same thing with me on the ground. There is at least 100 different submissions. And I only really practice 3. Armbar, choke from the back, and foot locks. That's about it. And I only practice those from specific setups. Now, I've been exposed to a whole lot of them. I know a whole lot of them, and I have a basic understanding of all of them. But again, I only master a few. For higher ground, we have said this over and over again, our mastery will always revolve around self-control and grit. That's where our mastery will lie. Self-control, grit. Does this mean mindfulness is unimportant? No, it means it's important. And we will dabble a little bit in it. We will integrate it a little bit. But that's not our focus. Does it mean stress management is Not important? No, no. Stress management is absolutely important. But are we going to focus on that? No. We're going to dabble in it. We're going to give a little bit of it. But again, that's not our main focus. Does it mean self-esteem, positive self-esteem is unimportant? No, that's important. But again, that's not what we're mastering. Our mastery will revolve, our work will revolve around self-control and grit. That's what's been for the last 5 years.
Do you see that changing depending on how science perceives or techniques?
So do I see that changing depending on how science perceives it? Yes and no. Because again, it goes back to this idea number 2. There is no magic bullet. What will happen with science is there will be one part of the research that everybody, grit is not a new concept. Just to be very clear and honest, grit is probably older than the Bible itself. Self-control is also probably older than the Bible itself. None of these are new concepts. But right now, the research that is hot button is grit and mindfulness. Alright? So what will probably happen with science over time is they'll have a new area of focus. So, in a sense, can we change? Maybe. If we discover all of a sudden that self-control and grit is no longer important, then yes, we will change. But chances are we won't. Because at the end of the day, these are the pieces of the puzzle that we focus on. Now you may argue, well, why is that more important than the others? Again, that's not what I'm saying. It is not more important than the others. It's not that in Rio's case, Seoinage and Uchimata and what other 3 throws he knows is more important or more effective than 67 other throws. It's just that to Rio, those 5 is what fits him. It's what he likes. It may even not necessarily be what fits him, it's what he likes. All 67 throws are equally effective. For higher ground, it's the same thing. Honestly, part of this is what I like. When I started the higher ground, I understood self-control from a cultural perspective, and I understood grit from a martial arts culture perspective. So I picked those 2. And I like them. As an organization, we kind of just adopted that. Sorry that you're all kind of suffering under what I like. All right, but I just wanted to really point that out. It's important that because there's no magic bullet. So what does this mean? This means, yes, fun is important. Free play is important. That's why we do a little bit of that. But again, that is not our focus. Right? Everything is a balance of things. It's a puzzle piece, right? It's a balance of the love and the character building, right? Mentoring is important, for example. That's one of the biggest things that I got heat from the community because I didn't necessarily do mentoring. We have elements of mentoring, but we don't really do mentoring in the strictest sense. Because again, that wasn't our focus. Mentoring or even recreational activities. A rec center is definitely effective, yes. But again, that is not our mastery. That is not what we're mastering in. We could turn this place just to a regular rec center, sure. Put pool tables, put different activities, let kids pick as they come and go. We can absolutely do that. And we're not saying that that's bad. What we are saying is that is not our mastery. What we are mastering on is developing self-control and grit to kids. That's what we care the most about. Everything else we will touch on, and everything else we will send them to a partner who has those pieces of the puzzle. We got to know what our piece is. All right? So I want everybody to be clear on that. The other thing, too, is because we focus so much on grit and self-control, these are 2 different social emotional skills, right? I hope everybody understood that. We did a whole lesson on self-control and how to develop it. People remember that, right? That's where self-talk came in. You guys remember those self-talk and all of those? That was a very hard training day. The self-control, it took us like 2 full days to go over self-control because it's a hard concept, right? But because we focus so much on grit and self-control, this is part of the reason why, right, interest and passion matters to us. They matter to us. us. It's part of the reason why we have many options. right? Because part of grit is what? What's the first part? Passion. So we gotta help kids find something they're interested in. But in contrast, this is also, because of the self-control piece, there's also importance, and I say this importance, in getting kids to try things they don't want to do. And this is philosophically one of the hardest arguments we sometimes have with new people. No, we will not just let kids do what they like. Sometimes we will force them into things they don't like. Why? Because we want them to build self-control. Self-control is the idea of not just doing things you desire or you enjoy. Self-control is also the idea that you're doing things because you need to do them, because there is a greater reward or an avoidance of a greater consequence. So that's why that part is important. Yes. Okay, I want to be clear. Yes, interest and passion is important. Yes, we want to find their interest or passion. However, it is equally important to force kids to do something they don't necessarily like. Because let me tell you something, as we go deeper into grit, what you will realize is that no matter how interested or passionate you are about an activity or about something, to get good at it, you will be forced to do things you absolutely hate. And this is the reason why a lot of people don't master anything. Because intrinsically, we all like to operate in our comfort zone, even in the things we love. The thing is, we're simply removing all the stress from a child. And we're catering to whatever will reduce the most stress from them. That's not bad. However, it can be counterproductive when that's all we're doing. You guys have to remember that because our focus is grit and self-control, we need to actually expose our kids to those stress and scaffold it and teach them how to respond to it. Okay? Coddling does not develop skill. We are not protecting them. Coddling protects them from stress. We cannot protect kids from stress. This is what I call helicopter parenting. Well, it's not just what I call it, it's a real thing. Parents nowadays, because they don't want their kids to be stressed, they don't want their kids to have problems, what do? They follow their kids even in college, even at work. There's now a real problem where bosses are getting calls from the parents of their employees, asking the bosses, why did they do this to their child? We laugh, but it's a reality. And again, what's happening there is that we have had this idea that we got to protect them from stress. No, we have to reduce the stress. Yes, because of trauma. Yes, we have to put them in an environment where the stress is not constantly there, where the stress is not triggered. However, if we end there, then we're just coddling. What we need to do is scaffold it to where they can handle the stress. Because here's the reality, they're only here 2 hours of the day. Even if we were to integrate into the school, they will only be in school for 12 years, 8 hours of the day. What happens when they're no longer in school and they go to the real world? The real world will not care if they're traumatized. Did anybody in the real world care about your trauma? Any of your jobs? Well, you work here, yes, but I mean, most places. You cannot take a sick day just because you don't, you feel like something traumatized you and it's triggering your stress. Most jobs will look at you and say, fine, take a sick day and don't come back. And here's your final paycheck. We have to prepare kids for that. That's why we cannot just remove the stress. And like I said, sometimes that's so easy. We've done it. Gosh darn it, we've done it in our mapping sessions. And sometimes I or Barbie or somebody else is the voice of reason where we say, wait, time out. We've been doing this for the last 6 months. When are we going to expose them back to the stress so that they can actually deal with it? Okay, that's very important. We don't want a bunch of kids who think that the norm is that people will adjust to their trauma. That is not the norm. And that is not life. Life doesn't care about our traumas. Sad reality. Now, in a perfect world, it'd be awesome if it did. But it doesn't. When you get thrusted into the world, it's survive. And if we want to prepare our kids, we have to remember we cannot coddle them. This is why sometimes, for those of you that don't understand, we keep forcing kids, even though they're crying. And it looks painful. We tell them, sorry, yeah, you gotta do this. Hey, but again, there's a scaffolding that's necessary. But that's part of the reason why we have to inject them back. Because here's what we don't want. We don't want them having good behaviors here because the stressors are removed, but when they're in their classroom, that behavior doesn't transfer. Why wouldn't it transfer in the classroom? Because the stressors are there, and the teachers don't care about removing those stressors. We don't want that. We want kids to be able to have as much less stress-free here, but then learn skills that they can take when they're in the stressful environment. That's what we want. Now, again, I want to be very clear. There are organizations and methods where what they care about is the healing process. So they remove all stresses from kids, and they only do that. That's okay. We send them to those places. They're effective, they're necessary, but that's not our mastery. I want to be very clear. That's not our mastery. That is not what we do. Tunidito is a great example of that. Tunidito cares about the healing process. I love their methods. I want to be very clear. I love them. I've been in their place. What they do is they remove every stressor possible. And they make it as healing and as mindful as possible. I love that. But that's not who we are. When we need to send kids there, we send them there. Because that's not who we are. Okay, so I want everybody to be on the same page of this. So, alright. The other part that we need to understand is identity matters. Before we can even go with grit, so before grit or self-control, even though this isn't our main job and our mastery, we do need to create some sort of identity. Okay? Now, it isn't our focus, but that's why we talk a little bit about the growth mindset. Now again, there are organizations whose only focus is growth mindset. That's great. Alright? And again, I'm not opposed to that. And I'm not saying our method is better than theirs. But I'm saying it's not our focus. However, we do need to touch on it. Okay? And here's the basic identity that we want our kids to have. The first one is that they, we say this, are worthy of love. That's part of our values. We want kids to know that part of their identity is that they're worthy of love. You're not a throwaway. Doesn't matter what you've done. Doesn't matter where you've been. You're worthy of that love. You deserve it. Alright, so that's the first part. Okay, because some of our kids believe that love is earned. How many of you have talked to a child and they absolutely emanate and manifest that? No. We're telling them, no, you don't need to earn love. You simply deserve it. You're worthy of it. That's part of the identity. The second identity that we care most about is the growth mindset. And the growth mindset is simple, is that they have the capacity to learn, do, behave in any way Keywords, capacity and want. Okay, one of the biggest lie that we subscribe to in the world is that there is such a thing as innate talent. There's no such thing as innate talent. There may be biomechanical advantages, but there's no such thing as innate talent. Brain science is proving us wrong. Natural talent. No such thing. Brain science is literally proving that theory wrong. Doesn't matter if you look at music, chess, sports. Biomechanical advantage? Yes. Some things might be a little easier, like basketball will be easier for Art than it is for me. Biomechanical advantage. But every other skill in basketball, I can surpass Art if I wanted to. I have the capacity to surpass Art. Yes, I do. If I wanted to. My capacity and ability to do that is limitless. We need our kids to learn that and believe that. No label. Now, again, this is where we get labels, okay, are only important to help us define the environment they best work in. Labels do not describe nor imply limitation. Because unless brain science is wrong, there is no such thing as limitations as of yet. Our brains are capable of changing however we want to change it. At any age. Yes, it's easier when you're younger. But at any age, you can learn any skill you want to learn. Any skill you want to learn. You name it, outside of biomechanical, again, biomechanical limitations, all right? But any skill you want to learn and get mastery in, you can do it. All right? There is no limitation. Whatever label they have, ADHD, in my case, I had what is now known as ADHD, combined type ODD, plus spectrum autism. That was my label. And when I was 5 or 6, my parents were told that that label meant limitation. And this is what they told my parents, what the doctors told my parents. Your child will never go to a regular school. You have to send him to a special school and you have to raise him a special way because he will never be able to do a normal life. This was 25 years ago. Because of autism, spectrum autism, and the ADHD, combined type ODD. Back then, they just called it severe destructive ADHD. Now it's called attention hyperactivity deficiency something, and ODD is like oppositional defiance disorder. Okay? But again, they were wrong. I'm living proof that they're wrong, and there's data and science that proves they're absolutely wrong. I went to a regular, not even a regular, but a high credited, the best university, the hardest university to get in the Philippines at the age of 15, younger than most of my peers. That did not define my limitation. When we get kids with anxiety, with depression, with ADHD, that helps us define how to best set up their environment so that they could learn. We know this kid has anxiety in groups. So to start them off, let's put them in small groups. But it doesn't mean that they're limited to small groups. It means that with proper scaffolding, they can operate just as well as anybody in a big group. Given time, love, and enough character building, enough skill building. That's anybody. They're able to now teach people who have extreme disability that are so-called they cannot learn things. They're showing that it can be done. They can learn things that were thought to be impossible. Our brain is limitless. Our brain potential is limitless. And we need to give our kids that definition. You can do anything you really want to do. You can learn it. You have the capacity for it. But I'm just not good at that. You're not good at it yet. You can be just as good as whoever you want to. And that is not a lie. Yes, you may have trauma, and that starts you at 70% underdevelopment. Yes, that is true. But it does not mean you can't catch up. Will it require more? Yes. Okay? So this part of the identity is really important. Right? This is why love, once again, is so important, because it shows them an environment that there is no condition. Alright? And part of this, in order to maximize this whole capacity, this is where the growth mindset comes in. We can encourage it. Now again, even though this isn't our focus, we can encourage it by delivering the following messages. And you can do this without a program, in any program. That one, mistakes are good. It doesn't define your intelligence. That's the problem with testing kids sometimes. Well, not sometimes. For the most part. Is what they begin to do is they begin to equate that they have a 50% in math. What do they begin to equate that with? I can't do math. I'm dumb in math. No! What it means is you made mistakes. That's good. It means you have room for progress and growth. Alright? The second message we need to give our kids so that they can maximize capacity and they can have that identity is yet. Everything is a yet. You can't do it yet. You're not good at it yet. Meaning there will be a time and an expectation. This is a time and an expectation. I just can't control my anger yet. In other words, there's a time and an expectation that you will eventually be able to. Because science does say they can. Given the right tools. And the third part that we got to get our kids to understand is that no expertise, no experts. This is a problem with natural born athletes and natural talent. They don't want to learn. Why don't they want to learn? Because they already know it. I have several, there's at least 10 different CEOs that I know in town. They have the same complaint. They hate hiring college graduates. Every single one of the CEOs I know in town say the same thing. They hate hiring college graduates. They would rather hire someone who's not necessarily a college graduate first. Or they would rather wait, and this is the problem in our societies because our college graduates want to get in a job, but they need the experience for a job, but nobody wants to give them the experience to get that job. But here's the reason why. And a lot of them, in their opinion, may not be the truth, may be just an observed opinion. Their opinion is because a lot of us, a lot of people who go to college, they begin to think they're experts, they're not willing to learn their company's way. Because they already know it. They're already an expert. They went through 4, 8 years of school doing this, so they already know it. And the CEOs are saying, but I don't want you to do it that way. And what you know may not necessarily be correct. But they can't accept that. So our kids are also in that mindset sometimes. They're already experts. Right? They can't learn anything from you. This is the same syndrome of, someone who is in jiu-jitsu don't want to do another sport, don't want to try soccer, because in their mind, what can soccer teach me that has to do with jiu-jitsu? Hey, but you don't understand. There are cross-pollination of skills, and we'll learn that in a little bit, right? So no matter how good you are at it, you need to keep doing it. The next part is that failure happens. We need to tell our kids this. Beyond telling them it, We need to make this a reality for them. Failure happens. You're gonna suck. It's okay. You're gonna suck. It's okay. Sometimes what we like to do is we like to put them in environments where they're always the best. And we keep telling them, you're the best. And then, this is what I call the small town athlete syndrome. They grow up in a small town, they become the best, and then they go to a big town, and then they realize that there are literally nobodies in the big town, and they quit. Failure happens. We gotta prepare them for it, and it's gotta be okay. Alright? Because failure happens, quitting after failure is not okay. We subscribe to this idea that if you fail, don't do it again. Subconsciously, we do. But again, this is part of the identity. That becomes their identity. I can't do it. Well, just because you tried for like 5 tries and you couldn't do it does not mean you can't ever do it. But again, that's part of our culture. Okay? This is the whole, how many of you have seen the get rich quick stuff? We have an obsession with that. Or get healthier in 30 days crap. Or get ripped in 30 days crap. Or learn how to play the guitar in 30 days. All those are crap. Alright? Because you will fail and the process is always longer than what you think it is. Alright? It always is. And we gotta prepare our kids for that. Alright? And when you do fail, failure does not equate dumb or lack of ability. It just is part of it. And it doesn't mean try harder. It might actually mean try different. See, sometimes because we don't want our kids to fail, our only message to them is keep trying it, keep doing it, try it harder, do it harder. No. Maybe that is not the right approach at all. Try different. Don't quit just yet. Try this other approach. This has to be part of our kids' identity in order to even go to grit or self-control. Has to be. Because otherwise, grit won't happen. If they don't believe this, grit won't happen. Because a certain part of grit actually is not fun. Grit in itself, there is fun in it. Number 1 is fun. Number 3 is fun. But the practice part, which is what we're going to learn today, there is very little fun in that. And for most of us will die not ever having mastered anything. Because we only want to do things that are fun or interesting. But to really master something, we have to be willing to do those not fun, not interesting crap. And this is the mindset that goes with that. Alright. Before we go into a break, questions and comments. Vicente.
I really agree with the failure thing because I was talking with some other CS students at the U of A and about like who the companies like to hire, like software companies, and a lot of these companies they don't like the straight A students.
No.
Because they like you said, they're the no experts thing, like they come in there thinking they know everything, and also too they don't know what failure is. So with software companies, like people screw up all the time, and it's not about, and this happens in any job, but like especially with software companies, you will submit a piece of code that will break something, that will cause a bug. It will happen. Like you'll fail at some point, and for these kids, like that just got straight A's and always told that they're great. They don't know how to handle failure. Therefore, they don't like hiring those kids because they know that if that happens, they're just going to be like, oh, that wasn't me, oh, I didn't do that, blah, blah, rather than just taking responsibility and like accepting the failure and trying to make it better.
Absolutely. That's the same complaint a whole lot of CEOs in town tell me. Why they don't like straight out of college kids. Because they feel that whole failure rate, they're not willing to go through it. And
Is the failure that happens and saying that not to, lack of, like, accountability, is that part of accountability? Is that something that we need to remind them of in the sense of, to point out that failure?
yeah,
And that's through accountability, we're also.
yeah, there is a proper way of messaging it, but yes, absolutely. We have to do that. To develop grit and self-control, we have to be, that's why I said yesterday in our training, naming the behavior is so important. That's part of that. Naming the failure is equally important. We'll figure that out as we go through practice and what that looks like. You will figure out that one of the most important elements of practice is positive feedback and negative feedback. You need both equally.
I'm not denying the fact that failure teaches you and failure is needed when you're doing things. But it's possible though, right, to understand failure but not fail. When I go into things, I don't automatically think that I'm gonna fail and it's gonna be okay to fail. Still in my head, if I wanna do something, I'm gonna do it with the intention, but I'm not going to fail because just the way that I grew up, or I should say the way my upbringing was, is I had one shot to do things growing up. That's it. That's the only opportunity I had. And now things have changed, but it was I'm going to do whatever to make sure that happens. And now I'm noticing that, it might not be the best way about going about things, but is it wrong to have that mindset then? Because, like I said, I still kind of carry that when I do things, I'm not going to fail because I don't see it as an option. If I do, I understand it, I'm going to get over it, lick my wounds and keep going on, but I just don't, having that mindset of just saying that it's okay to fail kind of puts a lack of urgency on it though, don't you think?
Wait, if you notice, we didn't say it's okay to fail. We said mistakes are good. Failure happens. That's all we're saying. Failure will happen. We're not saying you should go in there. I absolutely agree with you. If you go into the mindset, if you go in a tournament thinking that I'm going to fail, you're going to fail. Right? But what we're saying is that it will happen. It's an undeniable part of it. And we can't shield them from that reality. And when it does happen, exactly what you said. You're going to have to lick your wounds and keep going. Failure, quitting after failure is not okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Christine.
No, I was just, agreeing with your answer and what you were saying was that the mindset of, I'm going to accomplish this. No one's gonna tell me I can't.
Yeah.
But I think also not just understanding failure, but sometimes experiencing it, because if you have the mindset, yeah, you do so good, and then the one time somebody, you don't do well, it's I understood it, but I didn't know how to get back from it. So that's how some people are. Like the one wrestler chick. Yeah, she did good all the time. And then when she did fail, she spazzed out.
Yeah.
She freaked out. So I think understanding that this can happen, but don't settle for that. Don't just quit because you did the wrong. Then when you said, if you get back in it, suck it up.
Yeah.
That's the part that we teach.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's why I hope it clarified. We're not saying failure is okay. We're saying failure will happen. And honestly, if you read and you listen to business people, entrepreneurs, they actually say the first thing you want your employees to do is fail fast. That's the first thing you want to happen. Is within 90 days of their job, you want to see them fail at something and see how they respond to it. Because if they fail fast and they keep on going, then you have an employee who will stay with you and who will do whatever it takes. But the problem is if your employee is only experiencing success and in a year end they experience failure and they don't know how to deal with it, then you have a bunch of unknowns a year in after the investment you've done with them. So there are software companies are notorious for doing this. There are companies that actually purposely give their employees a project that they know they will fail in within their first 90 days and make it a part of the evaluation. Because they want to see how their employees will respond to failing fast. So in a sense, what Christina said is you almost want them to be in an environment where they can experience failure with guidance. That way they know how to deal with it. Now, I'm not saying we are going to do that here. Okay? That's not our focus. That is not our focus. Our focus is self-control and grit. Our focus is not that. Alright? But again, that is part of it.
So if that's like, I'm not our focus, but like, we don't wanna expose them to failure here.
No, I'm not saying we don't want to expose them for it, but I don't want us to be like
Purposely
perfect.
set them up.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Oh,
we're
sure,
not
do
gonna.
that.
I mean, if you do that as part of, if you do that as part of basketball, cool. I do it as part of jiu-jitsu, yeah, but it's part of the, it's part of the sport. Yeah, it's part of the sport, but I'm not saying we will all make an intentional effort to do that to our kids. And honestly, with our kids, it may not be necessary because they already experience enough failure in other aspects of their life. So that's why I'm saying that's not necessarily our focus. Our focus is self-control and grit, but we need to deliver this message to our kids. All our kids need to hear this. This is something that has to be integrated into our culture. We have to tell our kids this. Alright? Otherwise, again, they're not going to even develop self-control or grit. If we want them to develop self-control and grit, we got to give this message.
How explicit does the message need to be?
In my jiu-jitsu class, it's extremely explicit. I mean, it's extremely explicit. I literally tell my jiu-jitsu class like almost on a daily basis. You know, and we do this, if you guys remember, almost every competition class, they do that plank. And you hear me repeating this over and over again. Your knee will drop, just pick it back up. You know, it's okay for your knee to drop. The point is, are you going to quit? I make that. And then I tell them, if you can't do it yet, then we're going to scaffold you to do it, because eventually you will be able to do it. It's very explicit for me. Now, I don't have a curriculum
In
following that.
context though, but
Yeah.
not like explicit general, like, there are no experts for anything,
Well, I mean,
right? Like, or,
again, in my class, I can do it as explicitly, because
right,
what
but
we
you do it in context, so it
yeah, we
makes
do it in
sense.
context. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, you don't just tell a random kid at a random time. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, please don't do that. That is ineffective.
I think
Yeah.
in jiu-jitsu, it's also, the sport itself is its own teacher.
Oh yeah.
Because you're like, did that hurt? You know, when you're in an arm bar, you know, take 2 steps backwards, what did you do? You planted, did you? So you have to learn from your own mistakes in jiu-jitsu, whereas you can have the same mentality if you a math problem, if they fail the test. Let's take 2 steps back.
Yeah.
What did you do? What was your study habits? How did you know, we can work it backwards to an extent, but I think jiu-jitsu has its own set of, that's unique to its own.
It's actually the way it's just set up, but the reality of it is every sport, every activity has those same elements. It's just that for jiu-jitsu or judo, you don't need a good coach for it to naturally happen. That's the difference. But every sport and every activity, whether it's music or chess, it has those abilities, same abilities. Just you need a very good curriculum and teacher. So that's just the innate advantage of martial arts in general. Other comments or questions before we take a break? No. All right, we'll take a 10-minute break. Okay, so we went to growth mindset, right? And again, before grit and self-control, part of that is the identity. We talked a little bit about identity, and that's necessary. All right, and then also mindfulness, right? Because in essence, there's like 3 skills required to certain things. Right? Mindfulness, stress management, and growth mindset. These are all parts of different, almost pre-skills. They're not necessarily prerequisite skills, but skills that are directly linked to grit and self-control. So, in other words, while our work may not focus on those, it will have to touch on those. So that's why we talk about growth mindset. Mindfulness, again, is simple. But again, there are activities that are much, much better for mindfulness. So for example, if you guys are ever really interested in mindfulness, there is a very, very, very well-known researcher who developed an entire yoga curriculum and actually trains people. It's called Niroga. So Niroga. And I'm having the pleasure of getting introduced to this person. But his name, the founder, the guy who developed it, let me just pull up his name real quick. So his name is Bidyut Bose. Bidyutbose. And again, he's developed an entire curriculum that is focused on mindfulness. And again, that's not our focus, but it definitely integrates into it. And what he does, he uses yoga. And he calls it dynamic mindfulness. And this is he's actually not just developed a curriculum, he's developed a methodology, a way of delivery, a specific playbook, if you would say, on how to do mindfulness. And part of that, all right, and in the basic sense, mindfulness is really just the concept of getting kids to focus on the now and here, on the actual thing that they're doing, on the here and now. Like I said, in its simplest sense, it's getting kids to breathe, relax, let go of whatever other thoughts there is, and just focus on that activity. That's why here, we do that for like 2 minutes per activity, right? We get kids to, we're not necessarily meditating, but we get kids to take deep breaths, stretch, doing stretching exercises. Balance exercises can be turned into mindfulness. Walking exercises can be turned into mindfulness. Certain drawing exercises can be turned into mindfulness. I know Jessica's art class is a very unique way of doing mindfulness. But again, it's not our focus, but it's necessary because part of grit is focus. Part of grit is mindful practice. Part of the reason why we don't improve. How many of you like to run? And run almost on a daily basis?
Away from my problem.
Right? You will know, in a serious sense, like running, actual running. Right? But for most of you, your running will never beat any records. You may be practicing it every day, but it won't necessarily beat any records. Versus a guy like Kenny who's actually running for a purpose, right? He's running to beat records. Now, you and Kenny both spend probably, well, maybe not probably, but it could even be the same amount of time of running, but you're not necessarily yielding the same results. Right? It's the same thing working out. Right? A whole lot of people in the gym lift. All right? And a lifter who's been lifting for 1 year, both those two people versus a power lifter who's lifting for 1 year will have two completely different results, even though their gym time might be exactly the same. A lot of that has to do with the ability to focus and be mindful. All right? A lot of that has that ability. And I've done it. I keep track of certain things. So mindfulness is an essential ability for grit, right? So for us, we just do that with quiet focus time, intense focus on something. We require kids to focus on something and not get distracted, all right? And integrating breathing exercises. That's very simple, basic mindfulness. It is not mindfulness per se, all right? But again, because it's not our focus.
This morning on the Day Show, they had a whole thing on mindfulness.
Yeah.
And the people, how they do it, different ways. It wasn't all yoga or this and the other, but there was a real neat thing for to me. It was.
No, yeah, and it absolutely is. Mindfulness is a real neat thing. And like I said, to me, the best person right now that I know of is, and there's a whole lot of science behind it. And that's also, I want to be very clear. If you Google search mindfulness, you will get lost because it's the buzzword right now. right? Like I said, grit and mindfulness, all of a sudden it's a social emotional skill that's the most important, and everybody thinks it's the hack to life. It's like, no, it's not. All right, but when you really look at it, you will get lost. So I like this guy because it's an actual science. There's research. He has data on how he's doing it, and like I said, he's using yoga. There are curriculums that use archery for mindfulness. There are curriculums that use Tai Chi. There are curriculums that use art. There are many ways to do it. And like I said, ours though, we don't focus too much on that. We simply include it because it's necessary to be included. Right? Another part of what we need to discuss is stress management. Right? Again, this is not the focus of our organization, but we do have to talk about this. Alright? We do have to at least teach kids how to handle stress to a certain degree. Why? Because of the population we have. Right? So stress management does become an important part of the conversation. Right? We actually have a little bit of curriculum that we kind of use on stress management. Right? Crossroads is an example of this. You know, it's a little bit about stress management. Right? But again, for us though, all we really do when it comes to stress management is de-escalation. We help kids identify their emotions. Right? We help them identify the cause of their emotions. We help them identify the response to those emotions. And then help them identify a better response to those emotions. Right? That's what the RTE team does. Right? It's going through that, okay. But if you really think about it, the de-escalation part of the RTE team is not necessarily, again, our focus. It's just one of the little things we do because it's necessary to develop grit and self-control. You cannot develop grit if you're constantly stressed. I'm going to say that again. You cannot develop grit effectively if you're constantly in a state of stress. It's hard to learn skills when you're in a constant state of stress. This was something I was discussing in the long email thread I now have with Dr. Diamond about unlearning. You guys remember that's, you know, we were talking about unlearning. And one of the things she said is that when the brain, in neuroscience, what they learned is when the brain is introduced to stress consistently, what it does is it likes to revert back to the old pathways. And so our brain has the capacity, like I said, our brain has the capacity to do whatever we want it to do. We have yet to discover its limits. Right? We literally have yet to discover its limits. We are figuring out that the human body and the human brain is capable of extraordinary, superhuman, superpower-like feats. I mean, superpower-like. Being able to do 14,000 push-ups in 12 hours. That's like superpower-like. It's possible. Being able to swim butt naked in the Arctic Ocean, in the ice. That is possible. Being able to live in the Tibetan mountains with thin piece of clothing so that you could control your body temperature. Those are all possible. Again, there is literally almost no limits as of right now to our capacity. But the problem is, whenever our brains are exposed to stress, it automatically reverts back to a different pathway, to comfortability, to survivability. So the problem is to develop, and I'll go with you, to develop new skills, we have to constantly be able to adjust it to their stressors. And somehow constantly celebrate the success so that way they don't revert back whenever there's stress. So stress management is part of this, real.
Is pressure type of stress?
And again, just like trauma, stress is interpreted differently by individuals. So I can't answer that question. I don't know the answer to that question. But
Because some people perform better under pressure.
yes, yeah. But I think this, again, I don't know the answer to that question. Cece.
In my opinion, I would answer that question by comparing the difference between acute stress and toxic stress.
Yeah, no, explain that.
So acute stress is something that's minor, something that you need to kind of push you, which in your sense would be pressure. And then toxic stress is something that's happening continuously and affecting the brain in a negative way.
I will agree with that explanation. All right?
And also throwing adrenaline in there, I think as well, because I know when you get that
or toxic. I think it depends on what you want the outcome to be. Because if you look at the military, you want to be able to perform under the worst possible conditions at their best. So if you're experiencing that as stress, then I think, yes, you could include that. If it's someone who's been sheltered for most of their lives, and then suddenly they go off to college, and now they're having to, do their own stuff, and that could be a pressure or a stress that wouldn't even affect another person. They'd be like, no big deal. They don't know since they're 16 or whatever. I think it depends on the person.
Yeah, but there is still a differentiation between acute and toxic. I think much like trauma, it is the perception of the person receiving it of how it affects. Because like we learned about trauma, it has nothing to do with the event itself. It has to do with the perception of the event that makes it either traumatic or not traumatic. So yeah, I do agree with that. All right. So all these things considered. Right now, let's go into actual grit. And we already did self-control, so we're going to go grit. And again, 4 elements of grit. What are they again? Passion, interest. This is all grit now. Second part is practice. Third part is purpose. We talked about this yesterday. And the last part is hope. Now, practice is what we are going to focus on today. Now, like I said yesterday, there is flow practice, or at least in the definition and the context of Dr. Duckworth's research, there's flow, and then there's deliberate. Now, I will, to start this off, okay? Hey, what are you doing?
Well, marking on that.
Okay, so you're going to sit here? Okay, so I will start this off with saying the following things. Deliberate practice is not practice as we know it. Okay? If we define practice right now, for most of us, what is practice? Simplest definition, what is practice? Repetition. Doing the same thing over and over again. Deliberate practice is not that. Okay? It is not that at all. Now, I will say there is an element of repetition in deliberate practice. Yes. Yes, but it is not that at all. It is not the only thing. In fact, here's the reality. Okay? Deliberate practice versus practice differs in the following things. First one is outcomes. Repetition in itself, regular practice in itself will not improve your skill. Based on a scientific perspective, it's not. This is why I said, some of you can run at the exact same amount of times that Kenny runs, but you will not improve anything. Versus someone who, Kenny, who is doing a deliberate practice or a purposeful practice, we don't know which one he's doing yet, but a very specific practice. Some of you will play basketball the same amount of times as Michael Jordan maybe even, but you will not develop Michael Jordan's skills. Not because of genetics, by the way. This was a discussion me and Desmond are having. We are proving more and more that there's no such thing as innate talent or genetics. Here's an example. And there's research, if you guys are ever interested in the research of deliberate practice, buy the book called Peak by Dr. Erickson Anders. Okay? This is his whole research. He went through thousands and thousands of experts in different fields to figure out how they practice and develop a science to practice. Erickson Anders. Right? The book is called Peak. Alright? Now, here's an example. I'm just going to give you guys an example just to create the differentiation that there's no such thing as talent. In music, there is such a thing known as perfect pitch. How many of you here are musicians? Okay, how many of you are familiar with what's called perfect pitch? Okay, what is perfect pitch?
Being able to hit the note without being too flat or too sharp.
It is a person's ability, very good, that's exactly what it is. It is a person's ability to not just hit the note, but identify the note to the T. You play it, they hear it, they know exactly whether it's a C sharp, C flat, C minor, C sharp, C suspended 7, flat, with a minor in there. That's not a joke.
Very dirty chord.
Very dirty chord. It's a real chord. Now, what they found is that out of 10,000 musicians, only one musician will have this. Out of every 10,000 professional musicians, only one will have it. So for the longest time, people thought this was genetics. People are just born with this gift of perfect pitch. An example of this is Mozart. Mozart had perfect pitch. Frank Sinatra is known to have perfect pitch. Frank Sinatra, you can play any chord and he will know exactly where it's at. Play any song, he'll know exactly where it's at. Mozart, his ability was a little bit different and a little bit even more advanced. Not only can he identify, he can tell you exactly the instrument that it is with almost 100% accuracy. And any instrument you do the pitch on, some people can only do it if it's a keyboard, right? He can do it with any instrument you pluck or play or blow. He'll tell you. So Frank Sinatra had this, but Miles Davis, who is another very great singer, doesn't. So they said, well, perfect pitch must be a genetic ability. What they found is that it's not true.
That's just an exposure now.
At all. There are several factors that are involved in it. The first one is how early were they exposed to music. They found out that kids, when they're exposed to music before the age of 5, their brains wired differently. In fact, anything that you expose to your child before the age of 5, yes, to Kenji, right? Their brains will wire completely differently, and their brains will wire according to that. And Timmy for the music part, right? And so what they found is people like Mozart, Frank Sinatra, people with this perfect pitch ability are all exposed to music at a very early age, from 0 to 5. Mozart's dad was a music professor, and they had over 100 musical instruments at home. Not only did he practice with them before the age of 5, he played with them as if it was just play.
But exposure doesn't guarantee.
Exposure doesn't guarantee disability. So then again, they began to say, maybe it's still just genetics. But then they found out this interesting phenomenon. They found out the majority of Chinese speakers, Asian speakers, especially Chinese, or any Asian language that has a tonal language, they found that majority of their people, their population, have this ability. So they were like, well, wait, time out. Are we saying that these Asians are genetically wired to have perfect pitch? But then they said, but the problem is, the same exact genetic makeup born in a different language that doesn't have that tonal language don't have the ability.
It's like, I can't hear the difference between L and R.
Yeah.
But then the Japanese American, who is not even just 100% Japanese DNA-wise, and
They can't.
They can't.
So again, the genetic myth and talent was debunked on that. Then a Japanese scientist decided to do an experiment. A lot, and let me tell you guys, a lot of research on deliberate practice, because culturally this is what is ingrained in us, has been done by Japanese scientists, because this is part of our culture. But this Japanese scientist, what he did is he took 100 children ranging from the age of 2 to 5, and he did a very specific practice to these kids. Randomized kids, very specific. Some of them got it in a year, some of them got it in 2 years of practice. But at the end of the experiment session, every single one of the children in the experiment got the ability to do perfect pitch.
So did you say their age range was?
2 to 5. Again, before the age of 5, because it's the easiest time to develop this. Every single one of them. When remember, in fact, professional musicians, what's the ratio? 1 out of 10,000. With the kids that they did the experiment, and it's not like grueling experiments. It's very simple things that they did, ages 2 to 5. Now, not all of them developed it at the same rate. Some of them got it in less than a year. Some of them got it in 2 years, but they all got the ability. Alright? So now they have proven that perfect pitch actually has nothing to do with an innate talent or gift. It is simply deliberate practice. Every skill, and that's just one example, every skill you could think of is simply deliberate practice. The problem is, again, it is not practice as we know it. Because practice as we know it is simply repetition, right? And our approach to practice, traditional practice, outside of repetition, is if they're not getting it, what do we tell kids to do if they're not getting it? Do more. Or try harder. Do more, try harder. I'm going to tell you, we've been trying to get Kenji to do pull-ups since he was 7. I got him to do it in 5 days. From not being able to do it for the last 2 years to literally within 5 days, he's now able to do, how many pull-ups can you do the last time we checked? Yesterday? I think 3, right? Non-stop?
700%.
Okay, within 5 days. Alright? Because again, for the longest time, I'm a subscriber of just traditional practice as well. Alright? Traditional practice also, alright, it's experiences, even the good ones experience, and those of you that work out know this. What's called a plateau. How do you spell plateau, Jesus? Right? Is that correct? Please tell me.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Practice plateau. Right? There's a plateau. So at a certain point, you progress, and wait, I know we had a person, you did weightlifting, right? Competitive bodybuilding or weightlifting or something like that. Did you? Yes? Yes? Bodybuilding, right?
Not bodybuilding.
Not weight, so powerlifting? Olympic weightlifting, right? So, okay, no, that's, right? And I'm not going to put you in the center then. Alright, but again, even when you ask athletes, right, there is this plateau that most people will hit. And it's like, oh, that must be my genetic limit to what I can lift. That's like, you hear that all the time in the gym. Right? That's just as far as I can go. Alright? So there's this plateau. They experience this plateau. And the other thing about typical practice is it's usually specific to the sport, to the arena or area. So for example, when we think of practice, if we want to improve math, what is our approach? Do math. That's typical practice approach. When we think of pull-ups for the last 2 years, my approach with Kenji was do pull-ups. Okay? Didn't work. We did 3 days of this experiment that I did, no pull-up involved. And then the 4th day, we finally made him do pull-ups, and he did one to both our surprise. I didn't expect it to work. And we're both like, oh my God! We were both like, this is nuts. It actually worked. Right? So, again, there's a difference between regular practice and deliberate practice. So what is deliberate practice? There is repetition involved in it. Alright? There is repetition involved in it. However, not only is it do more or try harder, it's actually try different. Because like I said, this is the problem with our current education approach. We want them to read. What do? We keep making them read. And they just got to try harder. But what we have to realize is scientifically, that's not actually how our brain works. If you want a student to improve in math, have them do music. Surprisingly, the same skills you need in math and problem solving are the exact same skills you learn in music. It's very scientific. You want kids to do better at reading, have them do sports. Because surprisingly, the same problem-solving skills you need in team sports are the same skills that you need in a lot of the comprehension behind reading. We're finding out more and more that it's actually not just about doing more or trying harder. It's actually about trying different. Because our brain wires very differently. It's just like sports. It's easier to understand in the context of sports. The best athletes in the world don't just practice one sport. They cross-train. This is a common thing. Top athletes. I'm not talking about, you're just run-of-the-mill athletes. I'm talking about your top athletes. They cross-train. They take training from different disciplines, and when they do their physical training, they incorporate those. For example, it's a joke about football players, but what do they do outside of football? The best ones. They do yoga or ballet. Judo and jiu-jitsu players. Outside of judo and jiu-jitsu, they usually do Olympic lifting or rock climbing, wall climbing. Or swimming, that's another one. Basketball players that are really, again, top of their game. They do cross-country runs. And soccer or martial arts. A lot of basketball players do martial arts. The best baseball players do Tai Chi or other forms of martial arts.
Who is the best baseball player though?
He does Aikido, right? Or, yeah.
Does he?
Yeah, he does Aikido.
Oh, then
Yes, he does martial arts.
Oh, then
It is much, much easier to understand from a physical sport perspective. But the funny thing is, everything we know about sports actually has very little to do with the body. It has to do with the brain and how our brain develops. So again, it's not just about trying differently. It's not just about trying harder, but it's trying different. The other thing is, a whole lot of this, right, when it comes to practice, is about time. We subscribe to the idea that a doctor who has been a doctor for 20 years is better than a doctor who's been a doctor 3 years. That's actually extremely false and wrong. Experience, and I want to put this here, time or experience does not equal skill improvement. Now, time and experience will help skill improvement, but it doesn't equal that. In fact, what they're finding out is sometimes it is better for you to go someone who doesn't have a whole lot of experience necessarily, years. It's better for you to go with someone who doesn't have a whole lot of experience because their skill development might be way, way faster than the ones who does. Like I said, in sports, this is easy to understand, right? Because again, in sports, a person who's been lifting for 10 years versus a person who's been lifting 5 years, equal body mass, body weight, sometimes the person who's only been lifting 5 years outdoes the person lifting for 10 years. And what do we equate it with? The training program.
Is that bad?
It's not bad. I'm saying that's the difference between traditions. We equate it to the right thing, training program. Yeah, we equate it to the right thing. But in education, we don't. No, we don't. In education, we equate it with experience, with time or talent. That we subscribe to the idea that kids, if we just keep making them do math, they will get better at math. But in reality, to get better at math, we have to introduce them to different skills.
But if you take like your kids about the classes that do better, or whatever, you equate it to the teacher, or you equate it to the curriculum, or you equate it to the lesson plans, which is in the same way as like.
That's what we're supposed to do, yes. But that's not.
I think that's what we do.
Is that what we do in the education field? Then our curriculum would have changed completely. And the way we select teachers in America would change completely. No, I mean, no, let's be real. If that's how we measured success in
All
education,
I'm saying about measuring success, I'm just like, never mind.
no. I'm just saying, we don't do that. That's the problem. That's why we're still backwards. Go ahead, say.
I don't agree with that 100% because I think in a lot of different areas we do, when we see the progress, we do equate it back to the, maybe not on the grander scale, and maybe not a majority of the time, but in a lot of instances, if you take specific, never mind.
No, why did you say never mind? Wait, no. You might not be wrong. That's why I want you to
My
say.
thoughts aren't complete, never mind.
Okay, your thoughts are incomplete. That's fine. No, that's why it's but again, we have to, like I said, when it comes to the way we develop skill, alright, we have to really stop with the idea of just doing more and doing harder. We have to stop feeding that to our kids. Alright? The other part that we have to remember about deliberate practice is deliberate practice, motivation matters. Okay, and again, to get good at any skill, you need deliberate practice. Whether it's to get good at psychology, to get good at, teaching, to get good at writing, you need deliberate practice, all right? Whatever skill you want to think of, you need deliberate practice. That's why we need to teach our kids how to do deliberate practice. It's part of grit, all right? But motivation matters, because here is why deliberate practice is hard. Deliberate practice is almost always not fun. Almost always. So motivation matters. In fact, one of the key things in deliberate practice, to do deliberate practice, you have to have an environment that celebrates little progress. Yes. Okay? Self-talk matters. Yes, some people have intrinsic, innate ability to motivate themselves. That's great. But for the most part, some sort of environment, not necessarily another person that celebrates progress, matters. That's why sometimes competition is good. Tournaments are good because then it shows them some sort of motivation and reward for their progress. Great coaches are good because if the coaches are encouraging it, see, look, you've improved. Keeping track of the numbers. One of the funniest things I find in the gym all the time is you find people who are lifting who don't have notebooks or who don't keep track of how much they're lifting. And then they ask a year later why they haven't improved. I'm like, well, because you're not keeping numbers. You're not keeping yourself some sort of progress. You have to celebrate little progress. You have to watch progress.
Would outcome as well be a celebration of that little progress?
Yes.
Because I don't necessarily have people when I finish running being like,
Yeah.
wow, you've got 2 seconds off, or like 2 seconds, like, and over a period of time, it's like, that's a lot, because then you're running at a higher pace than the whole time.
Yes. So, like I said, you've created your own personal way of creating an environment that celebrates little progress. But regardless, that's how it is. And outcomes, and that's what we'll find out. In deliberate practice, tracking outcomes, all right, and actually putting the numbers out there in front of your kids matter. Being able to track those outcomes, because that's how you can help them understand, oh, look, you are making progress.
It's like me and Kenny last night, even with the mirror, we're flexing.
Don't tell people
But yes, motivation matters. To keep doing deliberate practice, it is perfectly okay to go in the mirror and flex. Yes, it is the same thing though in any brain function. It is perfectly okay to give yourselves pats in the back. That is part of deliberate practice. That is why regular practice don't work. You know why regular practice don't work? Because most of the time when we tell kids to practice, we just tell them to keep doing it. We're not keeping track. We're not counting how many shots did they actually make in this amount of time. And are they making progress towards those amount of shots? We just tell them, keep shooting those threes, keep shooting those threes, or keep doing this, keep running, keep running, keep running. Keep drilling your guard pass. Keep drilling this, keep drilling, keep drilling. We're not giving an environment that celebrates little progress. Part of deliberate practice is that. Because it is not fun, they need to see that. Part of deliberate practice as well, and this is one of the most important parts of deliberate practice, is it is very focused, it has goals, and it is skill specific. So in other words, for you to do deliberate practice, you have to have the ability to break down the simplest activity. Into smaller skills. You guys remember our goal setting training? That's all that is. To do deliberate practice, it cannot be like this. So I'm going to take the example of with Kenji with pull-ups. Our goal was to get him to do pull-ups. For the longest time, what I did is it wasn't skill specific. It was just doing the pull-ups, not understanding that the pull-ups is a very complex motion. There's several motions at work. Beyond just the pulling motion, there's the understanding of using your back, and then there's the understanding of using your core to actually help with the pull. It's not just as simple as pulling yourself up. That's why people who do lat pull downs of their body weight can't necessarily do a pull-up. Because there's actually several specific skills. So what did we do? And there's also a confidence part. Because there's a little bit of fear for a little kid of pulling up because there's a height involved. So our training for 3 days, up until the 4th day, involved something really simple. I made him climb wall. Doesn't have any pulling motion, and instead of pushing. And I made him walk across the wall. He was scared the first day. He even fell. Fell off the wall. Yes, I'm a terrible father. Right? But I didn't tell my wife this part. Right? But what I wanted him to do was conquer the fear of heights. So he would balance himself on the wall. Cars would pass by. He would freeze and stop. And then eventually, by the 3rd day, he was going on it, running across. Well, not running, but almost like... Yeah, this was in my backyard, and then jumping off the wall. The wall wasn't that tall. The wall was only about this high. That's not tall, right? So that was part of what he did. And then another thing he did was what we call planche. Not a full planche, but a pseudo planche. So I just made him hold his core a certain way, beat that time. And then another thing we did was just rope pulls. And that's the actual muscle part. Because I knew Kenji was strong enough to do a pull-up. It wasn't a strength thing. So we did rope pulls. We just did rope pulls. We did those, and then bag flips, right? Because the bag helps him understand the full body motion, right? And literally, that was it. We were doing it, and then we stretch him out, but that's another different story. But we were doing it, the exercise total, it was 5 rounds of that, was only really totaling 10 minutes. Except, you know, it's Kenji would chit-chat with me and kind of be a brat. So it'd take about 30 minutes, right? But again, it did. By the 4th day, he was able to do a pull-up. And, you know, he was asking me, climbing the wall, what has that got to do with it? It has to do with the confidence and the fear of heights. Right? But again, part of that is being able to break down the simplest activity into smaller skills. So for example, you want to teach your kid how to shoot a basketball. I'm going to take that example. The best coaches don't actually teach them just to shoot. They practice, here, I need you to do this, or however you guys do it, with the elbow, whatever, 100 times. Alright, without a ball. Let's do it, lay down. Right, it's breaking down those, again, it's easy to understand in sports. Right, but in math, guess what? This is why sometimes you have to take them away from the actual activity. Because sometimes the best way for them to develop that skill is not the activity itself. The example of the pull-up. The best way for him to develop the skill of pull-up was not doing pull-ups, but doing small skills that have to do with that. That is deliberate practice. It is very, and the other thing is, it's very focused. That's why you cannot mentally, no matter what activity, your brain only has a certain amount of time that it can do deliberate practice every day, because it is boring.
Is that like deliberate practice for one thing? Do you deliberate practice for multiple things? But
Yes.
And the time frame doesn't, like, it resets for each one?
So the science in that, that's a good question, because based on what I've known, the science in that is very murky.
Okay.
So they don't quite know yet if, like, if you take breaks and you deliberate practice on something else, is it, they're not sure. Some people apparently can do it, and some people they don't know yet.
Okay.
So again, science in that is murky.
So this is, I don't know if this is right, but is the Karate Kid movie, is that deliberate practice?
As much as I hate that movie sometimes, yes, it is. It is. It is a very oversimplification of deliberate practice. But it is, like I said, the Japanese people are really good at this. That's why most of the researchers making breakthroughs on deliberate practice are Japanese scientists, because culturally it's just ingrained. One of the things that when I first learned Kenjutsu, or sword fighting, alright, I wasn't taught how to hold a sword. I did egg toss. That was my first practice. And what my dad would do is he would have me grab an egg and I would have to catch it over and over. And what that did is it taught my hands to create a firm enough grip that the egg doesn't slip, but not too firm that the egg cracks. And that's how you're supposed to hold a sword. Right? So that Japanese are very known for that. So if y'all don't know Karate Kid, the way they practice blocks is by washing cars and painting, painting the wax on, wax off. Yes, that is deliberate practice. It's a repetition of those and doing those things. If you want to get good at running, you don't necessarily actually just want to run. Right? There are certain things you want to do, like sprinters lift. They squat. They don't just sprint all the time. Right? There's certain, because there are certain explosive movements that the squat teaches you that improves your running time. Right? Rima.
So couldn't it be argued that school is deliberate practice for life, but just done in the wrong way? Because they've taken life down. Like, isn't that the concept behind school?
That is the concept behind school. You are correct.
So then we're doing deliberate practice on top of deliberate practice.
We
But
are.
we're trying to.
We're actually trying to bring back what deliberate practice should have been. School have shifted from deliberate practice to just practice. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, Ken.
But like school is also deliberately practice made for like factories and like.
Yes.
Like, so that's why they deliberately made it that way.
That's now the system part,
So
yes.
that they could, yeah.
Yes,
all that.
it is. It was created in the Industrial Revolution, and they wanted as many laborers as possible. That's why we graduate in batches. That's why we are grouped in age groups.
Under the belt.
The bell, yes. Oh, don't even get me started on that, because then I'll go off on a tangent.
Well, and that's why we do what we do here, putting this all together, that's why we make them join something that they don't like, because it's, deliberate. But, it's the process that is killing us teaching the kids. They don't want the process. This generation wants it now. I wanna be able to grab a basketball and be the pro basketball player without the process of the work. That's the difficult part that we do.
Yes.
In the midst of everything, with all their trauma, with all their everything, on top of all that, we're trying to get them to learn the process.
Yes. And deliberate practice is really a focus on the process, not the result. And that's why, like I said, the Japanese people are so used to this. Because at the end of the day, to the Japanese people, there is no shortcut. You know, if you're, in our culture, even sweeping the floor has something to do with martial arts.
Sure.
I'm not going to show them that right now, right? But even the way you sweep the floor, even the way you guys want to watch deliberate practice in a different art, watch Jiro, the sushi guy. It's a movie on sushi. And what they do is the perfect he was actually part of the study of Dr. Anders, all right, that chef. What they do is they literally take people and they only learn a specific skill of making sushi. And sometimes the people are like, this has nothing to do with making sushi.
Yeah, you make omelet for 5 years.
Yeah, you make omelet for 5 years. What has that got to do with freaking sushi? That's not even sushi. But again, there were certain specific skills in that they're deliberately practicing that eventually led to sushi making. It takes 10 years to become a master sushi chef. 10 years. Right? But again, it's all part of that. And there's two more parts to this that's important.
Just one more question. So, I know we have deliberate practice in going, what's it called? Trying different things and like cross-training. Has there been anything to do with, which cross-training is most effective
With
based
what?
off of what people are exposed to pre-5 years old? Like, is there a connection there? Like, if using what you've been exposed to before the age of 5,
We're going to go there.
Okay, good.
So the next part of, you went right there. So the next part of deliberate practice is actually mental representation. Mental representation, images, and exposures. So this is what Rima's talking about. So what does this mean? People are like, huh? Deliberate practice involves a person being able to create a mental image and relationship to what they're doing. Now, if you're exposed to that skill, so for example, all right, when we say dog, and we all do this without realizing it, when we say dog, we all have a mental representation of a dog, right? Now, if I ask you what kind of dog is automatically put in your head, it will all be different. Because it is based on images and exposures that you've had. So, how many of you, when I said the word dog, the first mental representation you have is a wolf? So that's me and Kenji. Okay? How many of you, it's a German Shepherd? Chihuahua. Okay? A poodle. A Doberman.
Rabbit.
A mutt dog, a Dalmatian,
Dude, Jansen.
right? So, but I'm trying to point out something here. We all have a different image and mental representation of dog. Right now, here's where this becomes problematic. Okay, what if I were to teach a child about a dog who's never actually seen a dog? And there are no pictures or ways to draw it. What would that child have as a mental representation of a dog? Go ahead, Alexis, what did you say?
Anything with 4 legs.
Absolutely. It will be whatever animal that is closest to the word that I use to describe dog. It could be a cat, it could be a horse, it could be any animal with 4 legs, a head, and a tail. Because again, mental images and mental representations is how our brain works. So when you want a child to develop skill, you have to be able to relate that to something they're exposed to. Again, it's easy to do this with sports. Right? The best people who do sports, they watch film. They watch film of the action of what they want to learn. Before I squatted, because I hated squatting, and now I am, I have this strength log based on my weight class and how much I squat. I am on the upper 92%. I'm on the top 8% of strength. It took me literally 3 months to get there, to the top 8% of lifters when it comes to squatting. But the first thing I did, and Rio knows this because I didn't want to squat. First thing I did is I watched a crap ton of YouTube videos of how to squat. Experts, and I visually squatted in my head for a good 2 weeks before I did it. Yes, you're looking at me weird for some of you, but that's how experts become experts. They visualize. Chess masters, they don't see the chessboard. Chess masters actually see different images when they're playing chess. There is a guy who was able to memorize randomized digits up to 24 random digits and was able to memorize it. And the way he did is he had mental representations of everything.
You have a room and you put the numbers in a room and then you
Yes. But again, it's being able to use mental representations to our kids. That's why music and math coexist in the same realm. Because of mental representations. Right? When I was in Taekwondo, I learned physics. I would learn physics by representing it in my head as a kick. Everything that I did in school was a kick. If you guys notice, when I teach, everything represented is by jiu-jitsu images. Because a lot of everything that I'm doing now, because I'm mentally practicing jiu-jitsu in my head, is based on those mental representations and exposures and images.
Have they found this to be true for like everyone across the board, regardless?
Across the board, regardless, for people to become experts in deliberate practice, they all have a mental representation. It is
So
like
teaching the kids to do this is not like teaching them like a one way that's wrong. It's like
No, it is
it's across the board,
Yes.
regardless of learning style and everything.
regardless of learning style, being able to visualize, being able to visualize to something they're exposed to.
To make those ones.
Yeah. So, for example, you know, when we talk in jiu-jitsu, when we teach them the shrimping move, we tell them when you have a problem, you don't run away from it, you turn into it. That's a visual representation of shrimping. Right? So again, being able to create pathways and connections. The other part that's important in deliberate practice, all right, outside of mental representation is scaffolding. Huh?
I said this is literally two different things.
Yes.
Like what?
Scaffolding. So, going back to the example, going back to what I said, not only do you need to break down skills, you have to be able to do it in such a way that it's constantly challenging and constantly painful. Not necessarily painful like physical pain. But this is part in working out. This is part of the reason why people don't lose as much weight or get as strong as they want to. Because at a certain point, our bodies are designed for comfort, balance. Your heart rate is always at a balanced state. Your pH is balanced, right? Your blood. Our body is not designed for pain. But in order to become better at anything, that's exactly what we have to subjugate our body to. Constant pain. Alright, this is how people are able to swim naked in ice cold water, because what they did is they scaffolded it to a certain point, and then when they get used to that, guess what they do? They scaffold it to the next level. So there's never a plateau. There's never a point, if you want to put this in a workout setting, there's never a point where they did not feel sore. Because the moment they stopped feeling sore, what did they do? They didn't just work harder. Because what you'll notice, even in lifting, you can keep working harder. You can keep to a point where you're working harder and you still don't feel sore anymore. You have to do something different. You know the P90X muscle confusion crap? Right? If there's one part he got right, it's a little bit of that. It's the same thing with our brain. There is a certain part that we have to constantly, that's why scaffolding, we have to constantly get our kids to push through a challenge. This is why you have to force kids to do it. Because their response is what? I don't want to do this. It hurts. I'm already good at this. Why do I need to do this? This is our problem as a society. I already know this. Why do I need to keep learning? I don't want to read about this. I already know this. I already know how to teach. Why do I need to sit down in another professional development class? I already know. Why do I need to change the way I'm doing things? This is true for all of us. We like comfort zone. I'm already eating healthy. Eating any healthier is going to be too much. Yes, that's the point. The point is, to date, as of today, there is still no known limits as far as pain threshold to our brain or to our body. No known. If you don't believe that, watch Shaolin monks and watch what physical things they can endure because of deliberate practice. I mean, those monks can literally go in boiling water and sit there and not get burned. And it's actual documented. This is documented. Tibetan monks can actually sit in ice and adjust their body temperature. They've done this. They've done the imaging. Adjust their body temperature so that they don't feel cold. There is no known limits to date. What we can tolerate, what we have the ability to do. There's a guy who did, I think, 10,000 pull-ups in 12 hours. And people are, that's physically impossible. You will ruin your body or whatever. No, you won't. Alright, but there's a caveat to this. Rest. You cannot do deliberate practice all the time. Deliberate practice also involves periods. And this has to be short. Because here's the problem with any skill. Skill goes away. You know that whole riding a bike? Yes, to a certain degree, there's a certain part of our skills that will not go away. But to become a master at a skill, that goes away after a certain amount of time. No matter how much of a genius you are in math, if you haven't done it in 2 years, you will no longer be a genius in it. That's always what's wrong. There's always, but rest is important. Because here's the deal. Even in neuroscience, they've discovered that for every deliberate practice we do, we give up a certain part of our brains for that moment. So in other words, we abuse the power of our brains for a certain moment to get there. But to master anything, this is necessary. And finally, here's the last part of deliberate practice. Alright? You cannot deliberate practice without some sort of guide. Whether it's your self-guide, a good coach, however you do it. Every deliberate practice, to really do deliberate practice, I don't care how good you are. If you want to master something, you are not that good yet. Your guide will tell you that. The moment you believe you are good and you don't have a guide to tell you you are not, you stop doing deliberate practice because it is not fun. It's not fun. Right? But to master anything, this is part of grit. To be gritty, deliberate practice is necessary. It is part of the skills we need to teach our kids. That's why the guide part is so important, because it is part of our job as guides to celebrate the victories, but also to tell them, you're not that good yet. And here's the next level. Not just tell them, keep working harder. Now we're going to do this. We're going to expose you to something you're not used to. Alright, you really want to get good at, jiu-jitsu? Now I want you to do basketball. What does that got to do with jiu-jitsu? I'll teach you quicker feet.
Like, how do you teach that? Like, how do you know what this over here is what's gonna make you better at this? Like, how do you know?
Just make them believe.
It's part of the guide.
Figuring stuff out, you're just like,
No, that's why the part is the guide. You don't figure that part out. That's why you need a guide.
Like, where do you get it?
Where do you get it? Then you gotta find, so for example, if you wanna get better at basketball, you gotta find somebody who, this is what they do. Not just some
What about
regular.
for the kids though, what about for the kids, like, if they're stuck on math, how do we, that you don't know?
Oh, but you don't know, then you gotta find someone who knows.
Or research it yourself.
Yeah, or research it yourself.
Yeah.
But part of this, and this is part of why we're doing this, is guess what? We all need deliberate practice in what we're doing. To get good at what we're doing, we all need deliberate practice. It's part of the reason why I completely subscribe to the idea that everybody should have a different pursuit in life that they're not good at, so that they're constantly doing deliberate practice. That's why I do martial arts, because it's my way of getting that guide. But to your point, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Does that make sense? Kenny?
I think some of the best ways to teach it too is to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Like, so that the student is able to see it through you, rather than like trying to explain it to them, because they're not gonna, it's a huge concept, so it's like.
It is a huge concept.
Really
Yeah.
ridiculous to like expect them to believe it, but if you're doing it and they're wondering why you're living that certain way, they're gonna automatically come to them almost. It's kind of weird.
Which reinforces my point of what I said, which is why I am a strong believer that everybody should be doing something they're not good at outside of this. So where you're constantly being tested, like I said, for me, martial arts. Because it forces me and it shows the kids, here's what I'm doing. I have a drilling page, I have now, mine and Kenji's, I have a workout drilling page where I keep track of my numbers and progress. To this day, I'm still doing deliberate practice. Because again, like Kenny's point, it's my way of showing my jiu-jitsu kids, you are not the only ones I'm forcing to do this. Look at this, I'm doing it myself. I'm following every principle here. I have guides, I have rest periods, somebody's doing the scaffolds for me, I have mental representations, I do different things. It's not just the same thing, and maintaining focus. Oh, and I hope in all of this, there's this, when you are doing deliberate practice, there should be no distractions. In every deliberate practice, for it to be effective, there is no distractions. Goes back to the whole idea, champions are made in the dark. Right? It is when you are least distracted that you can do deliberate practice. That's why sometimes the guide does not exist during the deliberate practice. They exist before or after. Because when you do deliberate practice, whatever it is you're practicing, whether it's a sport-related thing or math or spelling bee or chess, you have to be able to do intense focus during that 30 minutes to 1 hour to where nothing, absolutely nothing, the whole world is shut off. And it's just you and that activity and what you are practicing. That's why I said deliberate practice is not fun. There is no book that says deliberate practice is fun. It is the reason why most people don't become experts. We don't like deliberate practice in anything. Anything. And for us, we settle at the idea, and this is our kids too, and we have to break that culture. We settle in the idea that we're already good. We don't settle for the idea that we need mastery. Excellence is the enemy of perfection. Right? But if we want to master anything, or perfection is the enemy of excellence. But if we want to master anything, we have to. Right? Mastery. To this day, even on this at Higher Ground, what am I constantly doing? I'm constantly learning. I'm thrusting myself in situations I don't like. We have SVP mentors teaching me to become a better CEO. I don't like what they're asking me to do. Some of it is painful. It really is. I don't want to do that. But again, I have to. I have to do deliberate practice myself. And it's something we all need to start doing. Pick one area. Pick one skill you want to get really good at. Something you're passionate about, and do deliberate practice on it. See just how hard it is. That way, when you make kids do it, you actually know what you're asking them to do. Questions about deliberate, and I want to be very clear. This doesn't even cover all the complexities of it, right? These are just the initial concepts that we're giving to you guys. Right? We are going to talk more about deliberate practice over the summer training when we have more time. But now I hope, why I wanted to do this is I hope this makes sense to some of the things that we do here that doesn't always make sense. Like, why do we force kids to do this? Why do we make kids do this? What does that got to do with anything? Right? Because it's part of grit, and under grit is this deliberate practice. I mean, we can talk about deliberate practice for days. There's people that this is their entire study for 5-10 years, and we still won't be able to unpack everything. All right, so I don't want to say this is the end of it. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. Questions, comments about this? Questions, no comments? All right, so with that, we'll do our last reflection. This is a 3-part reflection. No. Yeah, you can put this in a separate paper. Yeah, you'll give it. First question. Yes. First question. First question is going back to the first part of this. Alright, in all of today, not just the deliberate practice, but when we talked about the pre-skills to self-control and grit, and when we talked about serving versus helping. Alright, name one aspect or one thing today that was aha. And take note, it's very specific. It's an aha moment. Because the second part, and I want you to find one, the second one is, in everything today, I want you to find something that is painful. Meaning you don't agree with it, or you're really having a hard time with it. First one is aha. That means you agree with it and you're like, wow, yes, that is true. Alright, the second one is the polar opposite of it. You either don't agree with it, you're like, I don't really believe that, I think you're full of crap, or, I am having a hard time with that. Maybe I believe in it, but I'm having a hard time with that concept. Does everybody understand the first two questions? Everybody good? Alright, the third question. Alright, understanding deliberate practice and the idea that there's no such thing as innate talent. How will this change your approach to either teaching skill or learning skills? Whether it's personal or to kids, doesn't matter. Again, understanding deliberate practice and that there is no such thing as innate talent. Again, outside of biomechanical advantages, okay? It's different. Understanding that, how will that change your approach in teaching skills or learning skills? That is it. Third one, understanding deliberate practice and that there is no such thing as innate talent. How will that change your approach in teaching skills or learning skills? And like I said, for that question, it can be related to kids or it can be related to your personal learning. And then on Monday, an evaluation of the whole training will come out. Like I always do, please answer it. Give honest feedback, because again, it will kind of dictate how we